Good evening and welcome to day 2, and it's Friday night. So if you're watching this on replay, let me know, send me a comment. I know Facebook is still being a nightmare. I know it's not showing anybody anything, but we do what we must. So today the task was to talk about, or at least think about, what your worries are when it comes to not drinking. What are your concerns about saying that you don't want to drink anymore, that you want to take a break? What is it that you tell yourself in your head? We all have this inner voice. I've mentioned it a couple of times on videos. What are your concerns and your worries about not drinking? Because when you start to know those, when you can start to be honest and realistic about them, and you can say, yeah, do you know what, I am really worried about not feeling that buzz at 5 o'clock. I'm really worried about not feeling relaxed and being unable to unwind. When you can start identifying what your worries are or what the inner voice is telling you, even if it is just fuck it, have a drink, and when you're every time you try and stop, then these are the things that we can start to work on. There's a lot more to work on, so much more to work on. The 10-day program that I run is quite intensive. It's a smaller group than this, and every single day we work on you. So this is like a little bit of that. I'm just showing you the sort of things that we do, but this question isn't something that I normally bring into the 10-day program. But I also think when we're very first starting, and it's something we just sort of like cover just generally throughout all the time, because everything is to do with this, isn't it? So when we start thinking about our worries and concerns, it's something that if you start to address it, if you start to be aware, if you start to write things down and you know what your fears are about taking a break, if you know what it is that you're telling yourself or that you're hearing when you think about not drinking at the moment or again, that is what we can start to work on. And I can't help you work on it unless you put it in the group. But if you are thinking about it, at least you're starting to think about it. And like I said, in the 10-day programs, the memberships, all these things, they're smaller groups. So if that's what you're worried about and you don't want to sort of talk about this in here, then maybe those are going to be a better option for you. But if you are seriously wanting to take a break, these sort of things you do. Hey, Daddy, how you doing? These are the sort of things you have to start working on to change your mindset. So I'm going to just tell you a few things that I used to be worried about. I don't make a secret that I didn't just quit drinking and then everything was rosy and fine. Okay, this was a journey that took me a long time. I always knew I wanted to help other women do it, but I had to stop doing it myself first. I knew that it was making me feel crap, but I had lots of worries and lots of concerns and reasons that I did not want to take a break or have it out of my life. When you are doing something regularly, especially alcohol, if you have been doing it since your teens and it has been part of your life, of course, the thought of taking it away is going to concern you. Of course, the thought of telling somebody else that you don't want to drink anymore is going to be like worrying for you. And I used to be worried about how I would relax. How would I feel the way I felt when I very first, this is all very scientific in the way that it makes us feel, but how it makes you feel when you very first have that first sip of wine, that first glass of wine. I was worried about not having that. That was what I concentrated on. I liked it. I enjoyed it. A few people have written in here today, but I like it. I enjoy it. That's why I'm worried about getting rid of it. Because we romanticize about what it's like. We only focus on that one moment. There were those 1 or 2 glasses, that's sitting in the garden and drinking, that's sitting on our sofa. What we don't focus on is what happens after those 2 glasses. What we don't focus on is what happens in the middle of the night, or when we wake up on the sofa and we've spilt a bit of red wine, or the kids crying, or whatever it is. So I was really worried about that, like just not having it. Like, I enjoy it, I wanted it, of course I was worried about that. I was worried about having a reason to communicate with my partner. That might sound stupid. It might resonate with you. But our relationship wasn't great. And the wine kept me from having to deal with that. Okay? We didn't communicate. We sat on the same places in the sofa every single evening. And I drank wine until I went to sleep. I was worried I wouldn't be able to tell my friends. I was concerned about what people would say. Now, this does not happen to people who aren't really very big drinkers. if you know somebody who isn't a very big drinker, who turns up to events and has done for a very long time and only has a couple, or maybe even doesn't have any, if they turn around and said, oh, I'm not having a drink, it just doesn't matter to anybody, because it's always been that way. When you've been a big drinker and all of your friends are big drinkers and your family's a big drinker and everybody knows that you're a big drinker. I was on social media constantly talking about my drinking. I was like, validating my behaviour. Look at me, I'm having a glass of wine. I never said I'm having a glass of wine and in 4 hours I'm going to be asleep on the sofa and everyone else will be in bed. But when we do it, when people like that do it, people that have been drinking with their friendship groups for a very long time, that is where we start to panic. Because automatically with society now, as soon as you say that you want to give up something that you have been doing for a long time with other people and it's really socially acceptable, and there's a stigma attached to not doing it anymore, because obviously you must have a problem if you're not doing it anymore, that can be a really, really, really off-putting thing for people to want to stop. We would rather stay in the situation we're in, which is making us a little bit miserable. We're wanting to give it a try and stop it to see if we get better or we feel happier. We would rather stay there than deal with the fallout or the worry of what people think about us and what people are going to say. And I will tell you this, most people don't care. It's us that are worried about what other people say. And yes, people will comment. And yes, people will say, oh, what are you doing that for? It's Saturday night, it's Friday night. Don't worry about that 4-day challenge. Don't worry about that 30-day break. Of course they will. But we also have to know that it's none of their fucking business. And I don't mean to be harsh and frank, but it's not. And most of the time, they don't go home and really, really think about the fact that you're not drinking. They might, if that's what they want to. There's many people that talk to me and say, oh my God, my friend actually says to me, I wish I could do that. Or they've gone on to a Christmas do and they're not drinking and the people have come up to them and said, oh my goodness, I wish I had the strength to do what you're doing. People's thoughts and opinions are theirs. So the worry that we feel, and it was one of my main worries, how am I going to not drink? And my husband didn't even drink. It wasn't like I was like at home with a drinker, but that main problem of what will people think of me and what will they say held me back for a very long time. Or even peer pressure. When I tried to not drink, I would just go straight into the drinking as soon as I went out, because people would be like, oh, come on, have one. That's a whole area that needs to be dealt with, and it can be dealt with, and we can talk about it and deal with it. It just takes a little bit of time and understanding. I can tell you it's none of their fucking business, but it doesn't matter, because tomorrow you might wake up and you might still be worried about what people might think if you've taken a 4-day break, let alone a 30-day break. Try not to. Try to put that to the back of your head until we talk about this more in anything that we do in the future. I would worry that I wouldn't enjoy myself, that I'd be having a crappy time, that I wouldn't be on everybody's wavelength, that I would be no fun. That was one of my concerns. How will I have a good time? I've always gone out and drank, always. And I can tell you now that it isn't a problem. But that's a whole other video. I was worried that I wouldn't enjoy my evenings and that I wouldn't be able to go to bed and go to sleep, because I was so used to just being comatose, basically. I was worried about having to say, I'm never drinking again. Worrying about those future events that stops you. So say you're on today, you're on Friday, you're thinking, I'm going to do it. Next Saturday, I've got a party. I've got a meal. There's not really any point starting today because I'm going to drink next weekend. There's no point starting today, really. I had that thought process so many times. But then I'd also worry, okay, if I do 30 days, what about the summer? What about in the summer when I want to go out? And I spent so much time worrying about the future that, do you know what, all that time passed? All that time passed with me still drinking to get there. Time is still going to pass no matter what. So we can still try all of these changes and then wait until we get to that time that we're worried about and deal with it then. I hope that makes sense. And again, whole other video. I was worried I was going to be bored and that I would have nothing to do. And that is one of the things I wanted to touch on, because what you've got to remember is how many hours are we worried about here? Most people I know, yeah, it will be an evening thing. If you're drinking in the daytime and you're drinking into the night, probably message me and we'll have a chat. But most people that I know that are in here are nighttime drinkers and weekend drinkers. And when we sit there thinking, I need to have a drink this Friday, like today, for example, say it was today, because, you know, it's Friday and I've had a shit day and I don't know why I bothered to do that, and I'm worried about not being able to, and I need it, because you start to crave it. You start to have those sort of like itchy feelings of craving. Cravings are going to be there. And we have to back them. We have to back them away with distractions and alternatives, as I said. But what time period are we really thinking about that we're worried about? Maybe 3-4 hours? And it seems like, I can't not enjoy my evening without the wine. But unless we do it, unless we give ourselves those chances to do it, we'll never know what those 3 or 4 hours are going to be like and what the next day is going to be like. But we have to be honest about what that real period of time is and what we're actually doing. So when I said I was worried I was going to be bored and I was worried I was going to have nothing to do in those 3 or 4 hours that I was drinking, I wasn't doing anything other than drinking. So I wasn't changing up my day other than I was changing up my brain chemicals, which meant that I felt, you know, the dopamine and the serotonin and all of this was all going raging and creating a different mood. But I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't reading. I wasn't remembering the telly programs I watched. I wasn't doing any type of learning, or, you know, I love to learn. I love to read. I wasn't doing any of that. I wasn't going out of the house really, other to, you know, meet a friend maybe and have some drinks that my husband had dropped me off to. I wasn't sorting out anything in my house. I wasn't, you know, practicing things. I wasn't doing anything. That is my point. I wasn't doing anything. So when you say, and when we say, because I said it for a very long time and I thought it for a very long time, if I'm not drinking, how am I going to like manage my evenings? How am I going to manage? What am I going to do? I'm going to be bored. The drink doesn't make anything any different. When we go out and we drink, I saw something today and it was someone that saying, you know, we relate drinking to everything, don't we? So go into certain people's houses with our kids, go into certain events, go in to anywhere. We're not changing the fact that we actually stop ourselves from doing things. The drinking numbs us down, we sit down and we're not doing anything. So this mentality that we have that the drinking has created, that we will be bored. How many times do you wake up after having a drink and not remember your evening? How boring is that? How boring is it that I cannot remember so many of my evenings where I did nothing other than drink, but I can't remember them. I can't remember so many of my evenings, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, and that was what I was worried about. I was worried that I would be bored and I'd have nothing to do. But actually I wasn't doing anything, physically not doing anything other than watching the telly. Now I do lots of other things. And I feel like I'm got more presence in my life, okay? And that is something that, another thing we can talk about, but being present is hugely important. And again, we talked about the other people. I'm just reading off my notes now. And it's really, really important to know that sometimes, you know, with dietitians and just other people, they'll say when you're drinking, it's empty calories. You're not getting anything from them, yeah? So empty calories, if you've ever gone onto like, I think Weight Watchers or Slimming World or something like that, or any sort of like PT, they'll say, well, that's just empty calories. So when you're drinking, it's not giving you anything. So you're using your calories, and some people save them up, don't they? And other people are like, oh, I'll build up my things that I can have or whatever, or their points or whatever. But actually they're empty calories, that it does absolutely nothing nutritional or gives you anything. You're just having it, and then you pee it out or you puke it up or whatever it is that you do. So look at when you're drinking and the empty hours. There are empty hours that we are using here, or having, because we either don't remember them or something bad happens in them. And I'm just not sure, if we're doing this on a regular basis, how beneficial that is to anyone's life. You're kind of not present. Anyway, I'm gonna talk to you now about what I wasn't worried about. Okay, so all of those things I was worried about, and there was many more, you know, I gave myself every single reason and excuse that I did not need to remove the drink from my life. I drank from 14 to 40, and I was also what I would think the NHS and a lot of medical professionals, and I expect AA and all of those things, would call an alcoholic, because I couldn't even imagine going a day or two without drink. Not even a day or two. I should have been worried about that. I should have been worried about the fact that I made every single excuse for my tiredness, for my emotional state, for my anxiety. And I made sure every single time I talked about it, it was for any other reason other than the drink. But the only consistent thing in my life for that time, for between 14 and 40, the only consistent thing, I've had numerous relationships, different children, obviously, different jobs. I've moved 20 times. The only consistent thing in my life was the drink, but I never ever admitted to that being maybe the cause of some of the problems, relationship breakdowns, issues that I was having, jobs that I didn't want to have anymore, whatever it was. So these are the things I think I should have been worried about. I've gone over the things that I was worried about. Why wasn't I more worried about my health? I should have been more worried about my health. I had aches, I had a horrendous pain here. Only happened and flared up a lot after I had been drinking, which was nearly every day. And on the days that I didn't drink, the next morning, pain wasn't there as much. It went away after I stopped drinking. Why wasn't I more worried about the money I was spending? Money that I didn't really have. There is always money for wine. And I know people, if you are watching this back or you're on here now, you will relate to that. There is always money for wine or, gin or whatever. There wasn't always money for other things, but there was always money for wine. My kids did not go without, but I did. Some Bill people did as well. I was not worried about my memory loss. I should have been more worried about my memory loss. I should have been more worried about my relationships and what I was and was not dealing with everybody in my life. I should have been more worried about my relationships with my children. My children are gorgeous. I love them. But I should have been more worried about that sort of role modelling that I was doing, and the fact that on any occasion I would make sure that wine was involved. I should have been more worried about being so fucking unhappy, being so fucking lost. I should have been more worried about that. I should have been more worried about the fact that I actually thought to myself on numerous occasions that my life was basically over, that I had lived my life, and I will 100% tell you that I did this, that I had lived my life and I had wasted it, spending so much of it drinking, partying, whatever. Regrets. I don't like to regret things anymore. I've worked on that. But I should have been more worried about that. I should have been more worried about why I was feeling like that, and that I shouldn't have been feeling like that. I should have been more worried that I wasn't reading. I was a huge reader. I read a book a week at least. And I just stopped over the last 10 years, stopped reading. I loved that. I wasn't doing anything I enjoyed. I wasn't really actively doing anything I enjoyed. I should have been more worried about that. I should have been more worried, as I said, and I think this is a really big one. And if you take anything away from these 4 days, anything, if you've watched this video, I might even do a post about this because I know how much people don't see this. I should have been more worried that I couldn't go a day without talking myself out of not having it. I should have been more worried that I couldn't make it one day without talking myself into having a drink. I should have been more worried about the fact that thinking about having a week off of drink, 2 weeks off of drink, I was more worried about when I could actually basically have that drink again. And I wasn't worried about the fact that it was a problem, that I didn't really want to do it. I think if anyone feels like they really, really would struggle with having a few days off, that's when we need to start thinking, actually, this is time for our change. I should have been more worried that I just never dealt with my past, and I was living in it, and I was staying in it. And I also should have been more worried that I wasn't realising any of my dreams or my goals or anything that I wanted. I was just settling. I was settling for so much. And the wine just made it feel better. I forgot about everything. It numbs it all out. And it could be that there's massive trauma. I mean, I don't go into lots of things about my life, like my past. And I know everybody is different. And some people will need therapy to work through their traumas. Some people will be able to work through it themselves, but it's still hard. But once you've worked through it, we can start just being more focused on our present and what we want for our future. Because we are only on this planet for one time. So that should have worried me more. It should have worried me more that I was not making the most of the time I have here. So, with this deep and meaningful now finished, I hope that you are okay. I hope that your Friday is going okay. I'm at my mum's. I'll let you into a thing. Me and my husband separated last weekend. And so I have come to my mum's to do the whole, like, you look after the children, I won't look after the children thing. So I've had a bath and she cooked me tea and I'm wearing her robe. This is like getting a thingy, isn't it? And I'm gonna go and do a little bit more work and then I'm gonna chill. That's how my Friday night is gonna rock. And tomorrow I'm gonna do packing for my holiday and I'm gonna have fun with the kids. Now my Friday nights did not used to be like that, and it takes a little while to get used to. But I always wanted them to be like that. I think we need to worry more about what we're missing out on than what we're missing out on if we're not drinking. What are we missing out on by drinking? Because if it's causing more negatives and you're not remembering what you've done the night before and you're feeling like shit the next day, what's it actually giving you? Anyway. Yes. I absolutely agree with what Adele said. We don't take enough action just to change the things that we're sort of like angry at. You know, we get angry at ourselves because we're not doing the things we want to, but we're in a cycle where we can't. But actually when we take the break, and it does take time, and that's what you just said, you started, and starting is the hardest, and then it gets easier. The more little actions we start to take, the more things become easier. We start to put little routines in place and okay, that's done, that's done. I'm still not 100% on my health. I was banging out last year. I was like much healthier. I was more spiritual. I was like, in my first year, I was like really, really smashing it. And then I had COVID. And COVID like knocked me for 6. So like my eating habits got bad again. And, you know, I wasn't looking after myself as well again. So I had to step back up and look at that. Small steps, little actions, they create the change. One great big giant action of saying I'm going to do something and that's going to be the end of it will never work. But think about what you're worried about and then think about what maybe you should be worried about. And I hope that's been helpful for whoever does watch this, and I will see you all tomorrow for Saturday. Good night.